Welcome to Solar Insiders, a podcast reporting on the people, technologies, and policies shaping the world's biggest energy source. Presented by Sophie Vorrath, the editor of Renew Economy and One Step Off the Grid, and Rachel Williamson, senior reporter at Renew Economy. Solar Insiders is proudly brought to you by Pylon, the essential solar design tool to grow your solar business with quick and effortless proposals that will impress your customers. And Goodwe, the global solar inverter and energy storage company behind the all-in-one ESA battery system, who are proud to work with Australian cricketer and Goodwe ambassador Alex Carey.
Hello and welcome to Solar Insiders. My name is Sophie Vorrath. I am the editor at Renew Economy, and joining me today is Rachel Williamson, our lead reporter. How are you this morning, Rachel?
I'm great, so I'm great.
That's good.
It's
Aside from
a
the
beautiful day.
teachers' strike.
Aside from the teachers' strike, but they it's only
Good
2
for them,
weeks
really.
into term 3, and they still need
Yes.
a day off. So I
Yes.
feel like this already couldn't come soon enough.
And better conditions, so
Yes.
yeah.
I was talking about my kids,
Oh. No.
but
Oh,
yes,
yeah,
better
yeah.
conditions for the teachers. Absolutely, yes.
Yes. No more strikes. Just do what they want, please. They're very important. Right. So this week, you conducted our podcast interview. How
I
about you tell
did.
us a little bit about that?
Well, I was talking to James Petesic from PV Industries, solar recycler, last week, and he said exports of solar panels is still a big issue for the industry. And I thought, what? I thought that was not even a thing anymore. And he said, no, this is a real problem. And if we don't get the solar recycling pilot or the one-day stewardship scheme, it's just another area of leakage of this really valuable feedstock that this entire industry is relying on to function. And it's
I suppose it's what happens when
worried.
you stop exports, or they stop. I guess we didn't stop them, but they stopped. And then there's no plan B. And I guess the failure to set up a plan B is kind of the crux of the issue. So let's have a listen to your interview with James Petesic.
Welcome back to Solar Insiders. I'm your host today, Rachel Williamson, and today we have the co-founder of PV Industries, a solar panel recycler, James Petesic. Hi, James. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Rachel.
Now, last week, Renew Economy broke the news that the solar panel recycling pilot was paused. We don't yet know when it will re-begin, when it will start again. Now, people in your industry are worried about the impact of this for a variety of reasons. Some people have told me that the delay will stuff up state and national timelines for designing rules and the ultimate scheme. And others are saying they can't get enough feedstock because other companies have been taking waste panels for free, stockpiling, against when the pilot will start, when, they charge a gate fee. And so they can't get more customers in the door. But James, you came at it from a different angle when I spoke to you last week. You're worried that without this pilot, there's nothing to stop the flow of illegal and semi-legal exports from Australia. So why do you believe it's exports that are cannibalizing your supplies of broken and end-of-life solar panels?
So, from our experience, and I know it's maybe anecdotal, but we are, I guess, on the coalface of this industry and seeing where we're losing panels to. And more often than not, when we speak to installers, we'll go with installers being the first port of call. That's the first thing, first person a panel will see when it comes off the roof is the installer of the new panels, and it's taking off the old ones. When we speak to them, more often than not, the response, particularly 2 years ago, was, "Oh, I'm sorry, I've already got someone that gives me $5 a panel, $10 a panel," whatever figure they were getting paid, if not free. So from our perspective, we saw it firsthand that the panels were getting picked up before we were able to get our hands on them. And when we asked the installer where they were going, it was always offshore. They're getting sold over to Africa or the Middle East or any sort of developing country. So whilst I agree with all the other comments that you made in terms of the solar recycling industry having, losing out on feedstock, and there is lack of urgency on the legislative side without, a stewardship pilot, we see the biggest threat to the recycling industry domestically as offshore export or offshore reuse.
Until 2025, Australia was exporting about 80% of its waste panels. And I reported in 2024 that Queensland alone was sending a huge volume, 800,000 panels, I think, overseas. So that collapsed, partly because China is producing so many extremely cheap panels, and also partly because regulations changed. Can you talk to us about what changed and whether you actually benefited from that decrease in exports?
Sure. So two things we saw changed. One, the Basel Convention was, let's say, tightened, and it got around. Previously, people tried to get around the Basel Convention by saying they were being exported for reuse, when in actual fact we know they weren't being. Well, majority of them weren't being reused because we were asked to sell our panels to these individuals in any condition, quote unquote, broken or unbroken. So, despite the fact that was one, the Basel Convention tried to tighten their definitions of waste to say that if it was being reused, it needed to be adequately tested. And adequate is not a visual inspection, which is typically all that happens in these instances. Adequate means a luminescence-based test at best, which is the same test that happens when it comes off the production line. And the panels need to be adequately packaged. Now, we know again from experience that panels are just being stuffed into containers. So there is no palletization, there's no spacing between the pallets, there's no sort of guarding for the scrapping. Pallets of panels were getting, if they were palletized, were getting broken in transport. So that was for sure. So those things was the legislative side that had been sort of tightened a little bit, let's say.
And that was from early last year,
That was the 1st of
2025.
January 25, yeah. And then, as you mentioned, the cost of panels out of China, and China being the vast majority panels, the vast majority of panels that get manufactured come out of China. It's over 90%. So ever since COVID, there has been quite a big supply glut coming out of China.
Yep.
And
I
what
think
that's meant-
everyone who's in this industry is very aware of the
Yeah.
radically falling prices of solar panels, ongoing fall.
And so
Production.
what that's meant is the cost of brand new panels has dramatically fallen. And when you compare a 500 watt or a 450 watt brand new panel that can be bought directly from the manufacturer, or say from distributors or whoever it may be, customers in Australia that might be caught holding stock that's fallen off the CEC list, so the approved list that you were able to sell into Australia or is eligible to receive the credits or the rebates, to make it nice and cheap for the homeowners and end users of solar. That has meant that the brand new panels at 500, 450 watts at a cents per watt level are so much more competitive when compared with a 180, 200, 220 watt panel that's come off an Australian roof that's been on there for 10 to 15 years. So the economics don't really stack up anymore when you compare the cost of a new panel versus the cost of a used panel at the cents per watt level.
And that's for overseas reuse. So overseas reuse is just, there's no point even trying to reuse the ones here.
Correct. Even domestically to some degree, like I'm happy. Like I've got no issue with domestic. I have less of an issue with domestic reuse, as long as the panels are adequately tested again, because there are safety and warranty concerns around who wears a liability if something goes wrong with that panel. But if it stays in Australia and it is reused domestically, we are not going to lose those resources that are contained in that panel, i.e. the copper, the aluminium, and the silver.
So what I'm really keen to hear is, how much do you think that export trade has reduced since these things have begun? These rules have changed, and these sort of trends have been influencing the market. And have you benefited at all from more panels coming in?
We've definitely benefited from more panels, and it's hard to know whether that benefit is a result of just natural time that's passed and there's more panels in the market, so we're getting more panels, or it is in fact that less of these operators are out there getting panels and sending them overseas to developing nations. Again, anecdotally, I would say we've seen that practice, I'd say half. We still do see quite often installers that we speak to, they are still able to sell their panels to an individual that's undertaking these practices. However, what we have also seen is their willingness to engage with them has reduced because their threshold for what they will receive has increased. So they no longer will receive any panel broken, unbroken. They will only receive an unbroken, you know, let's say 300-watt panel plus or something. They'll have some threshold to say, oh, I only want this panel. And as soon as you start getting a little too particular with installers, it all becomes too hard. An installer just wants the panel gone and for the cheapest possible price, and they don't really want to have to think about it. So if they've got an upgrade job and they're taking a 300 water off the roof, some are broken, some are unbroken, they have to double or triple handle them, wait for someone to come and pick them up. It all becomes a bit too hard. So they're just like, you know what, I'll give them to the recycler. I don't have to think about it as much. And we are also seeing installers, I won't say wake up to the fact because it's a bit harsh, but come to terms with the fact that they're still able to make their $5 a panel. Although rather than selling it to an individual for $5, we charge our fee. They might put a $5 margin on it, and they offer our service to their customer. So they're still able to take a clip along the way. They're still able to make money. It's just in a different way.
So what I would like to ask you about is the future solar panel recycling pilot and how that will help deal with the export issue. And so for anyone who's listening to Solar Insiders for the first time, there are estimates of that there'll be more than 91,000 tons of solar panel rubbish by 2030. And so, the obvious question is, with that sort of volume, why can't you just start a recycling industry now? Why do you need the pilot? Why do you need the stewardship scheme that's intended to follow? And why do you need this to basically stop that export issue and push everything towards you?
Well, I guess it was exactly the reason we need a pilot is exactly in the question where you said there will be 90 whatever thousand tons of panel waste. So why don't we need it now? Well, there will be. And at what point in the future? Now, our industry, solar panel recycling, contrary to some belief, it is profitable and it is sustainable on its own 2 feet. The problem is it needs scale. So at 10 or 20,000 panels a year, sure, it's not sustainable, it's not profitable. But at 90,000 tons a year and millions of panels a year, absolutely we're sustainable and absolutely it is a industry that is economically viable. We need assistance to be able to get there. So businesses like ourselves that exist in the country have invested millions of dollars into establishing a facility, investing in machinery, investing in people, in order for our businesses collectively to survive until the point that we have a stewardship scheme up and running and we have 90 odd thousand tons of solar waste a year, we need help to get there and to survive.
And get the panels to you, which
Correct.
is ultimately what the pilot is being set up to do, to actually collect and transport everything. So is that a real issue for you guys as well? Is that, it's just the getting of the panel from the farm or the rooftop to your sites?
That's the biggest challenge for any recycler, I would say, is feedstock certainty. So when we speak to investors, I'll give you that example, and to say, hey, we need X amount of dollars to grow it and expand across the country. The the only part that falls down with this entire industry is how does this investor know that their money isn't going to be lost because we don't have regular panels coming through the door? And a product stewardship scheme would basically guarantee feedstock. And at that point, we would have a completely different conversation with investors and also with the industry, because we'd be able to secure more feedstock. Our prices also being $0 at the door, we would see less panels going offshore. So it's a bit of a double whammy, or sort of double barrel approach, where not only are panels free, so we'd get more of them, but we'd also get more of them because it's more competitive when you compare it with offshore export. So we'd receive not only a greater share of panels that are here, but we'd stop panels leaking from the system as well.
Let's talk about the enforcement of Australia's own export rules around solar panel waste. So it's basically, as you said, it's illegal to export a broken solar panel. And the rules are reasonably strict around what you are allowed to actually ship overseas. Now, last year, the Department of Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Water, that's the federal department, said it took part in a 5-week global operation to crack down on illegal waste exports. And the upshot was it searched 11 containers, sent 10 education and information letters, and issued 2 directions, or basically compliance orders under the Act. And last year, I think probably separately, it also fined a Melbourne company $20,000 after Singapore intercepted a container that contained solar waste that it wasn't supposed to. So it sounds like there is a little bit of enforcement happening, but what are your thoughts on these figures? Searching 11 containers over 5 weeks and sending some letters and a couple of fines. 1 fine last year that it reported. What are your thoughts on those figures and sort of the enforcement?
Obviously, we would love to see more enforcement of the rules. Naturally, the rules are only as effective as the people that enforce them, police them. And it also acts as a deterrent. So although we'd love to see, as I say, more, it's very hard to expect Border Force or DQ, whoever it may be, to commit resources away from searching other containers, because when you tune into the news and there's an announcement of a big bust at a port, it's rarely solar panels that have been reused or sent for reuse
No,
overseas.
it's not. They're definitely not focused on a few
Correct.
solar panels in a container.
And I think that's where it starts to fall down the pecking order. So whilst everything that we've discussed is perfectly accurate, when it comes to enforcement, it's not a high value item like some of the other busts that may happen, and it is not threatening lives in Australia. So its importance starts to wane when it becomes, or it drops down the pecking order of the border forces priority list, let's say. So yeah, it is hard to expect someone to treat it as much of a problem as some of the other enforcement that goes on at our border.
Australia is a resources country. It's very comfortable extracting resources usually from the ground, but it's getting a bit more comfortable with extracting resources from the sun and the wind and so on. But you mentioned before that solar panels have resources that are used here. There are established markets for them. What is your view of those markets? Are they big enough? Is there enough demand for the kind of products that you are actually extracting from waste panels?
It's a hard one to answer. So there is demand. So every single resource that we recover from a panel is a metal, except for glass and plastic. A number of those metals are on the critical minerals list, which is a list that's, I guess, updated by the federal government every year or every couple of years. And it's looking to, I guess, secure the nation's access to strategic metals for the next 10, 20 years. Silicon is on there, antimony is on there, not sure about silver. I'll have to double check. But from a silver perspective, it's a high enough value resource that we would absolutely want to recover that here in Australia. And in fact, the the richest silver mine that exists is on people's roofs. It's not in the ground. It's sitting on solar panels on people's roofs. We just need to access that silver. But when we look at things like antimony and silicon, they absolutely exist on the critical minerals list. So the federal government has flagged these metals as strategically important for national security. And yet we still see large volumes of panels get exported, and there's no real correlation that is drawn between that practice and the loss of the critical minerals that sits within them.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that line is never really connected?
I'd probably say two things. One would be education. I don't think people are aware of what metals are contained within a solar panel and in what quantities. And when you start to add them up and put it down in black and white on paper, like you said, 91,000 tons, that's a lot of material. And when you start to extrapolate that into the percentages of silicon and silver and antimony that may exist, again, it may not sound like much in one panel, but when you add it all up, it is a large quantity. And I don't think people are fully aware of that. And then secondly, the other reason is the lack of onshore manufacturing. So the businesses that would require, let's say, silicon is a really easy one to look at. So silicon is is the major component of the cells itself that makes electricity from the light and the sun. The, again, vast majority of silicon wafer that is produced out of China. So there is no silicon wafer or ingot manufacturing that happens onshore in Australia. So the demand for that product in Australia today is quite limited. So there's probably, when it comes to people kicking and screaming, one industry group, which is the recyclers, saying, hey, no one really wants to, we can recover it, but no one really wants to buy it in Australia because no one needs it. We buy all of our products in from offshore and overseas that, unfortunately, the markets to sell things like silicon that we may recover are very, very limited domestically. So in order to look at recovering, say, high purity silicon, we'd need a robust buyer domestically that's paying good money, and that unfortunately doesn't exist. They all exist overseas. So if we had a more developed manufacturing capability or industry in Australia that would require things like silicon or antimony, then we may have more voices at the table kicking and screaming saying, hey, we need these metals at a better price. But unfortunately, it's really only the recycler saying, oh, we can produce these things, but no one wants to buy them. So why would we
We're
invest?
here. We can do it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's the other side of the loop. So we can recover it, we can do it, but we can't sell it. So then it starts to become a matter of, well, what's the most economic way out of this? And is it offshore export of those materials, or do we just sell? Do we stop higher up in the chain? Do we not extract pure silicon? Do we just leave it as contaminated silicon with things like silver and we sell that as a commodity rather than extracting pure silver and pure silicon and pure copper? So we don't go down to the refining level. We just stop at the commodity level.
And what sort of impact will the pilot and future stewardship scheme have on that, do you think? Do you think that will be a nursemaid to a future demand in Australia, or do you think that is simply just going to make it easier for you guys to get really stand on your own 2 feet when the influx of panels really begins?
I think it's probably more the latter. Having the ability to stand on our own 2 feet is the most important thing, and attract investment to really start to expand and grow the business and the industry in a more meaningful way. That's the first challenge we need to overcome. In terms of downstream buyers, potentially presenting themselves after the fact, and maybe because we are then producing reliable streams of said metals, then it may become more economical to have an onshore manufacturing capability. But again, I'm not in the position to know in any great detail what the economics of silicon refining and silicon manufacturing is. So I would dare say that it it's something that would only come again with scale. And if we aren't able to produce enough of it, then it doesn't really begin to move the needle for any manufacturer.
And last one for you. The pilot's been suspended. We don't know when the process is going to restart again. What is this doing to your business right now?
It just holds us in a bit of a state of flux or a holding pattern, particularly from that investor conversation. Like, we are able to tread water, we're able to stay alive, and we're an okay business. Like, we're not losing copious amounts of money, and our future isn't sort of threatened tomorrow. But if it goes on for too many months or years, then we are unable to secure any form of meaningful investment. We're unable to grow in a meaningful way, and we're unable to hit those levels of feedstock that we need to become a viable business and a successful one that can begin to thrive in Australia. So, yeah, without stewardship, whether it be a pilot or a full-blown scheme, we don't have feedstock certainty, and without that, we aren't able to make sound investment decisions or grow the business in any sort of meaningful way.
James, thank you very much.
No problem. Thanks.
G'day, Alex Carey here, proud ambassador for GoodWe. The GoodWe ESA 3060 all-in-one commercial solution is available now from GoodWe wholesalers. With a massive 50 kilowatt hours of the battery eligible for the federal rebate, it's the perfect solution for small businesses. The commercial energy storage range from GoodWe is growing, with more models launching soon. Visit goodwe.com.au for more information or contact the local GoodWe team.
That was Rachel talking to James Petesic. It's a really interesting and I'm going to say fraught topic, Rachel.
Yeah, the stress that I'm hearing in people's voices in this particular industry right now is it is real. Like,
Yeah.
just, these normally sunny people who are just saying, if something doesn't change now, if something doesn't happen, we can't keep going. And there is no plan B for these companies. So,
And has there been any feedback, any progress on the government side or any new things come to light that give us
No.
a light at the end of the tunnel?
no.
Yes.
I've been reaching out to companies. People have been throwing some haymakers, saying we think this is the cause of the complaint. Reached out to them. They say they haven't heard anything
Right.
from
okay. Good
DQ.
Lord.
And so
Wow.
there's just a complete information vacuum happening right now.
Fascinating. Not what we need. All right, and moving on to other topics. I thought I'd touch on a story that reporter Joshua Hill wrote this week about Fox ESS, which listeners may remember was a real runaway success during the heady first months of this year under the previous settings of the cheaper home batteries rebate. It was one of the most popular products that sort of came from nowhere, and it was this sort of very good value.
Because they had extraordinarily cheap batteries.
Massive batteries for pretty cheap. And everyone got a bit of that action. And I think they sold, from memory, 25,000 units in 1 month at one stage. And And yes, so things have calmed down obviously in that market, but they have just launched a new C&I product, commercial industrial product, which I guess has similar appeal to that sector, which has been very underserved. And because of the changes to cheaper home batteries, not that I think any businesses were really taking part in that rebate, but because of the changes now, they most definitely won't be. But what we haven't talked about here, I don't think, on Solar Insiders before, is that New South Wales, just a couple of weeks ago, and again, speaking of information vacuums, it was one of those non-announcements that we kind of heard through the grapevine, and it was like, but they haven't announced anything, but it's there on their website. So yes, they quietly adjusted their peak demand reduction scheme, which was snoozed when the federal Labor launched its rebate because they didn't want to stack it. Parts of it were there. But it's been rebooted, and it's been rebooted with some really interesting parts to it, including that it's appealing to apartment owners and big and small business and commercial and industrial. So here is Fox ESS again spotting an opportunity and jumping into it, which is good to see. And there's plenty of other products on the commercial and industrial market. We see heaps of them at the trade shows and stuff. But it's really this segment that's yet to take off. So I'm really keen to see.
It's been yet to take off for years. If someone can crack it.
Well, because I think it's not quite there economy-wise, especially for businesses that are feeling. I think until batteries made sense, it didn't always make sense even to put in solar. So what I've heard from some in the industry is that people just haven't gone there yet because it just doesn't quite make sense. So there was a lot of excitement in those circles when this New South Wales change was announced, and everyone is kind of hoping this is what the sector now needs to get into there, and then we've got so it's maybe we'll see some movement. It'd be interesting to see what data Sunwiz comes up with in the next few months. Although this actually doesn't come into play till September, so we'll be waiting a while. But even so, there could be some activity with people locking in products and buying now and doing what they did with the other rebate where you connect it at the time. We shall see. And what else has been going on for you, Rach?
Well, yesterday, going back to DQ again, they released a new grant for interesting technologies that can basically enable electrons to move more freely through the grid, be it transmission right through to poles and wires. That's distribution. And the way they pitched it, there were 2 of the 14 recipients were EV charging companies.
Right.
And so they were, coming up with these ideas of how do we convince people? How do we price power at? One of them said, how do we price power at electric charge, EV charge points, to encourage people to charge when it's not a peak period?
Okay, so we're not talking about retail offers here. We're talking about public charging. How do we get people who are off street? Is that what we're talking about?
I think so. It wasn't particularly clear what they're on. I did contact them, so I'm waiting to hear back what that actually is. And the other one was a continuation of Jet Charger's project to see how to get more out of vehicle to grid enabled vehicles and see how they might actually support homes and ultimately the grid during peak periods. But there are a whole heap of different technologies that they could ask for up to $5 million. $5 million. And there are a whole heap of different ideas around everything from helping companies actually navigate transmission and connection sites right through to ideas to help apartments actually share and use solar and battery technology. So,
And these are all really
a lot of interesting ideas there.
Yeah, really important in what we call non-network solutions, I guess, because this is about making the most of the grid that we've got and avoiding that continual spend in infrastructure that, generally speaking, is what keeps driving bills up.
Yeah. And importantly, also things that are already happening. So they're not ideas that are being commercialized. They are ideas that are products that are already in the market.
Backing them in.
And backing them in, yeah.
Well, that's great. It is good to see these little things happening there where it's just, we see you, keep doing what you're doing, and let's try and support this tech and this approach. Because we need it. We need all of those solutions out there to make everything work the way it should. Alrighty. Well, we've got a big week next week, haven't we? We've got the Energy Conference in Sydney, the big Clean Energy Council's big conference, which will be Tuesday, Wednesday, and be very interesting to hear what happens over there. It's still going to be so much data center talk, which I think is really the topic of the day.
This year. It's all about data centers.
The new green hydrogen.
There's always a thing in a year. And a couple of years ago, it was offshore wind. Last year, it was home batteries. This year, it's data centers.
It's data centers. Well, yeah. And look, there's plenty of interesting policy going on there, and yes, the policy making machine is working overtime trying to sort this one out. And then in some states, are just doing what they want anyway. Which is very interesting. But we will leave it for this week. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you to our sponsors, GoodWe and Pylon, and we will see you in a couple of weeks' time. Thank you, Rach.
Thanks, Soph.
Bye for now.
Solar Insiders was brought to you by GoodWe. Across residential and commercial installations, GoodWe's all-in-one ESA battery solutions support the solar industry with reliable, flexible energy storage. From rooftops to large projects, GoodWe is helping installers and businesses deliver smarter, clean energy outcomes. Discover more at goodwe.com.au. Solar Insiders is also brought to you by Pylon. Pylon provides easy-to-use solar design software for solar installers and retailers with pay-as-you-go pricing, no monthly costs, and no lock-in contracts. Join Australia's top solar companies who trust Pylon to design high-resolution, CEC-ready solar proposals.